I took the night security job because it was supposed to be quiet. That was the word used in the posting, quiet. Not easy, not boring, quiet. Overnight security for an office complex that had shut down years earlier. The buildings were still owned by the city, still insured, still technically in use, but no one worked there anymore. They hadn't in a long time. My job description was simple. Patrol the grounds, check doors, log activity, call dispatch once an hour. If something looked suspicious, report it. Nothing ever did. At least, not at first. The complex sat a few miles outside the city, tucked behind a stretch of undeveloped land that never got built on. 3 large office buildings formed a loose U-shape around a cracked parking lot. Covered walkways connected them, their metal roofs rattling when the wind picked up. A tall chain-link fence surrounded the entire property, topped with bent sections of barbed wire that looked more decorative than functional. During the day, the place looked abandoned but harmless. Sunlight reflected off dusty windows. Dead leaves collected in corners. Old company logos were still faintly visible on signs that hadn't been updated in years. At night, it felt like a mistake that never got fixed. I worked alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. There was a small security office at the front entrance, barely larger than a storage room. Inside was a desk bolted to the floor, a rolling chair that squeaked when I leaned back, a radio, and a bank of monitors connected to cameras placed throughout the property. Most of the cameras covered the exterior, parking lot, fence lines, walkways. Only a few showed interior hallways inside the main building. The other 2 buildings had no interior cameras at all. That bothered me more than I admitted at the time. But I told myself it wasn't my problem. My job was to observe, not redesign the system. The first few weeks passed without incident. Every night followed the same routine. I clocked in, checked the radio, scanned the monitors, and started my patrol. I walked the perimeter first, then each building in order. I logged door checks, light outages, and weather conditions. I called dispatch every hour, right on time. Dispatch always answered. Their voices were calm, flat, bored. That was comforting. By the 3rd week, I barely noticed the silence anymore. The hum of the lights, the distant sound of traffic far beyond the fence, my own footsteps echoing through empty hallways. It all blended together. I started bringing a book to pass the time between patrols. That's when the first thing changed. It happened around 2 a.m. I was back in the security office, filling out my log and waiting to make my hourly call. When the clock ticked over, I picked up the radio and pressed the button. Dispatch, this is Unit 7, hourly check-in. Nothing. I waited a few seconds and tried again. Still nothing. I checked the radio. The signal indicator was full. Battery was charged. I adjusted the antenna and tried once more. This time, dispatch answered, but their voice sounded different, quieter, closer, like they weren't speaking into a radio at all. Copy, they said. Go ahead. I gave my check-in. Location, status, no incidents. When I finished, there was a pause, longer than usual. Dispatch? I asked. Still here, the voice replied. Just listening. That response stayed with me longer than it should have. I told myself I was reading into it. People sound different at night. Maybe someone new was on shift. Maybe the connection was bad. The next night, dispatch didn't answer at all. I called 3 times. Logged the missed check-in. Continued my patrol. Radios failed sometimes. That was normal. But the silence followed me. As I walked through the complex, I became aware of how loud everything felt. My footsteps echoed too sharply. The wind moved through the walkways like something breathing. The darkness between buildings seemed thicker, less empty than before. I started noticing doors that were unlocked. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked. I would check a handle, feel it give and pause, my hand still resting there. listening. Then I'd step inside, sweep the room, find nothing, lock the door again, and note it in the log. The next night, a different door would be unlocked, then another. Never the same one twice. The cameras never showed anyone entering or leaving. Point one night, I noticed something worse, that I was watching the interior hallway camera for Building A when I saw movement. I leaned forward, expecting a shadow or a glitch. Instead, I saw myself. Not live. Recorded. The timestamp said it was from earlier that night. The footage showed me standing in the hallway, directly in front of the camera. Not walking, not checking a door. Just standing there, staring straight into the lens. I knew I hadn't done that. I rewound the footage. The file froze, pixelated, and then corrupted completely. The screen went black and restarted itself. I didn't sleep after that shift. Over the next week, things escalated slowly, methodically. The radio crackled at random times, interrupting silence with breathing sounds that stopped the moment I tried to respond. My patrol logs went missing from the desk, only to reappear later with entries written in handwriting that wasn't mine. The entries were accurate, too accurate. They recorded times I hadn't written down yet, doors I hadn't reached, notes about weather changes before they happened. Someone was copying my routine. Someone knew where I would be before I got there. Then the notes started appearing. Plain white paper, no envelopes, no explanation. They showed up on my desk, on the chair, once, folded neatly inside my jacket pocket. You walk too fast. You check Building B last. You never look up. I started varying my patrol routes, changing times, skipping buildings. The notes adapted. I called the police. They searched the property from fence to roof. Found nothing. No signs of entry. No evidence of tampering. They suggested stress leave. I didn't take it. The final night came after a storm. Rain hammered the buildings. Wind shook the walkways. Power flickered. Cameras blinked. And the complex dropped into darkness except for emergency lights that cast long, warped shadows. The radio crackled. "Why do you keep calling for help?" The voice asked. IT wasn't dispatched. I ran. Through hallways that felt longer than before, past doors that slammed shut behind me, toward the security office, toward the only place that ever felt remotely safe. When I reached it, the monitors were already on. Every camera showed me from different angles, standing in places I hadn't been yet. The door behind me locked. The radio spoke one last time. "You're done calling now." I woke up in a hospital. They told me I was found wandering the road miles away, dehydrated, bleeding, and screaming into a radio with no battery. The complex was demolished months later. But sometimes, late at night, my phone rings with no caller ID. And when I answer, there's just breathing. I didn't realize I was being watched because nothing felt wrong at first. That's the part people struggle with when I try to explain it. Everyone expects fear to announce itself. Some sharp moment, some clear threat that flips a switch in your head. But real fear doesn't work that way. It settles in quietly. It disguises itself as normal. It waits until you're too used to things being fine to notice when they aren't. Nothing felt off in the beginning. There was no immediate danger, no obvious warning signs, no footsteps behind me, no shadows darting out of sight. No alarms went off in my head. Everything felt routine enough that I didn't question it, and that was exactly why it worked. That's how it started. I worked nights at a 24-hour grocery store on the edge of town. Not a big chain, just a locally owned place that stayed open because there was nothing else nearby. No late-night restaurants. No gas stations open past midnight. If you needed something after hours, this was it. The overnight shift was quiet, boring, and predictable. I liked it that way. From midnight until around 5 in the morning, the store belonged to me. The world outside slowed down to almost nothing, and inside, time stretched out in a way that felt manageable. The hum of the freezers, the soft buzz of fluorescent lights, the occasional beep of a scanner. It was all familiar, and a few regulars came through every night. Truck drivers grabbing coffee and energy drinks. Nurses finishing late shifts, still half awake. A couple of elderly men who walked the aisles slowly, leaning on their carts like they had nowhere else to be. I knew their habits. I knew what they bought. I knew which ones liked to talk and which ones just nodded and left. I knew all their faces. I knew who didn't belong. Or at least, I thought I did. The first thing that changed wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel dangerous at the time. It was the schedule point. One week, my coworker stopped overlapping shifts with me. Normally, there was an hour or two when we worked together, just enough time to restock, chat, complain about management. That overlap disappeared without warning. When I asked about it, management told me hours were tight. They promised coverage would return soon. IT didn't. Suddenly, I was alone for almost 6 hours every night. I didn't complain. I needed the money. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was ignoring the man who started showing up at exactly 1:17 a.m. The first time I noticed him, he didn't stand out. That's the unsettling part. If you lined him up with any other customer, nothing about him would have raised concern. Mid-30s, average height, clean clothes, no smell of alcohol, no erratic behavior. He never bought much. A bottle of water, sometimes gum, sometimes nothing at all. He would wander the aisles slowly, never rushing, never browsing aimlessly either. There was purpose in the way he moved, even if I couldn't explain it. He always ended up near the back of the store. He never caused problems. He just watched. At first, I told myself he was lonely, or bored, or killing time before work. Plenty of people had strange sleep schedules. Plenty of people didn't want to go home. He always paid in cash. He always stayed exactly 17 minutes. I noticed the pattern by accident. One night, I glanced at the clock when he walked in. Another glance when he left. The timing stuck with me in a way I couldn't explain. After that, I couldn't stop noticing it. He came every night. Same time, same routine, same quiet presence. I started feeling uneasy, but I couldn't pinpoint why. He never spoke unless I spoke to him first. Never stood too close. Never crossed a line that I could report. When I mentioned him to my manager, she barely looked up from her computer. "Sounds like a regular," she said. "Some people just don't sleep." I tried to believe that. Then the notes started appearing. At first, they were harmless. Receipts left behind with words written on the back. Nothing threatening, just observations. You stock the dairy last. You check the doors twice. You hum when you're nervous. I laughed the first time. Nervous laughter, but still laughter. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe one of the regulars trying to be funny. Maybe a bored employee messing with me. But the handwriting wasn't sloppy. It was careful, deliberate. And I never saw anyone leave the notes behind. I started checking the cameras more often. Every time a note appeared, I rewound the footage. The man was always just out of frame. That's when the store stopped feeling like it belonged to me. The aisles felt narrower. The ceiling lights felt harsher, brighter in a way that made shadows look wrong. I became aware of every sound. The click of cooling systems, the distant creak of the building settling, the soft scuff of my own shoes. Every reflection in the freezer doors made my heart jump. I started locking the office door behind me. I started carrying my phone in my hand, even when I was just restocking shelves. The man kept coming. One night, he stayed longer. 20 minutes, then 25. I watched him on the cameras, my chest tightening as he stood near the back hallway, the one that led to the employee restroom and storage rooms. He didn't move. He didn't browse. He just stood there. Then he turned his head. He looked directly at the camera and smiled. That was the first time he smiled. The next morning, my locker was open. Nothing was stolen, just rearranged. My jacket folded neatly. My bag placed on the floor instead of the shelf. My phone charger wrapped carefully and set on top like it had been presented. Someone had gone through my things. Someone who knew exactly where everything belonged. I reported it. Management said there were no signs of forced entry. Suggested I lock my locker better. That night, I found a note taped inside it. Locks are for peace of mind. I almost quit. I needed the money. That was my third mistake. The man stopped coming inside the store after that. Instead, he waited outside. I would see him standing just beyond the parking lot lights, far enough away that his face stayed in shadow. Always watching, never approaching. One night, I found the back door unlocked. I knew I had locked it. The next night, the alarm didn't trigger when I tested it. Then the power went out, just long enough to remind me how completely dark the store could become. The final night came without warning. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the store phone rang. I answered it without thinking. "You shouldn't have stayed," a calm voice said. The lights went out. The doors locked. The cameras went black. I ran. I don't remember everything that happened after that. I remember hiding. I remember footsteps that didn't hurry. I remember breathing that wasn't mine, slow and patient. I was found hours later by the morning crew, locked inside the freezer. Alive. Barely. The police never caught him. Weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was my name badge and a note. "You did well. I still check my locks every night, and I never work alone anymore." I work nights at a data processing center. Not the dramatic kind people imagine when they hear data center. No massive server rooms or blinking lights or temperature-controlled corridors. Just a plain, windowless building on the outskirts of town where archived paper records were scanned, cataloged, and uploaded into systems no one ever talked about. The work was repetitive, mindless, intentionally so. That's why I took the night shift. Fewer people, less noise, less expectation. From 10 p.m. until sunrise, the building was almost empty. Almost. On paper, there were 3 of us assigned to nights. In reality, I was alone most of the time. My supervisor worked remotely and checked in once a week through video calls that never lasted more than 10 minutes. The other night employee called out often, then stopped showing up altogether. Management never replaced them. They never do. The building itself wasn't abandoned, but it felt like it was waiting to be. Beige walls scuffed from decades of carts and equipment. Low ceilings that pressed down on you after a few hours. Hallways that curved just enough to hide what was around the corner without ever fully committing to a straight line. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, a constant insect-like hum that became noticeable only when it stopped for a second and came back on. I liked the predictability. Every night followed the same rhythm. Badge in at the side entrance. Coffee from the break room. Log into my station. Process files. Take a short walk every hour so I didn't fall asleep. Log out at dawn. Nothing ever happened. Until I noticed my notes changing. I kept a small notebook in my locker. Nothing official, just reminders. Tasks I needed to finish before morning. File batches that needed review. Occasionally personal notes, things I didn't want to forget because night shifts blur together in a way that makes days feel unreal. One morning, right before leaving, I flipped through it and saw an entry I didn't remember writing. "You skipped room C again." I stared at it longer than I should have. The handwriting looked like mine. The pen was the one I used. The phrasing sounded like something I would write to myself. I assumed I had written it and forgotten. Night shifts do that to you. I crossed it out and went home. The next night, when I opened the notebook, it was back. Same handwriting, same ink, same place on the page, but now there was another line beneath it. "Don't do that." That should have scared me. It didn't. Instead, I felt irritated, Like I'd caught myself making the same mistake twice. I told myself I was stressed, that I was dissociating, that working nights alone was messing with my short-term memory, that I crossed it out again and finished my shift. Over the next week, it escalated. The notes became more specific. You spent too long in the hallway, you didn't check the west door, you remembered this wrong. That last one sat with me in a way the others hadn't. Because I was sure I hadn't written it, I started paying closer attention to myself after that. I double-checked doors even when I knew I had just checked them. I reviewed camera logs for my own movements. I watched myself more carefully, like I was trying to catch myself doing something I couldn't remember. That's when I noticed the cameras. They weren't where I remembered them being. Not new ones, just different, slightly adjusted angles, lower perspectives. One of them now pointed directly at my workstation. I stared at it for a long time before convincing myself I was imagining the difference. During my next weekly call, I asked my supervisor about it. She frowned slightly. "The cameras haven't been adjusted in years," she said. "Why?" I didn't have an answer that didn't make me sound unstable, so I dropped it. The next night, the building felt aware. That's the only word that fits. Like the silence wasn't empty anymore. Like it was paying attention to where I went and how long I stayed. The lights stayed on a fraction too long when I passed beneath them. The hallways felt narrower than before. I started hearing my name. Not shouted, not whispered, just enough to make me turn my head. Every time, there was no one there. I told myself it was exhaustion. Then I found the audio logs. The system recorded ambient sound for security purposes. I had never listened to them before. I didn't even know I had access point. One night, after another note appeared in my locker correcting something I didn't remember doing, I pulled up the logs out of desperation. At first, it was just the hum of the building. Then my voice, talking, casual, familiar, having a conversation with someone who wasn't recorded. I listened to the entire exchange. I didn't remember any of it. The next log was worse. It was me crying, apologizing, promising to do better. I locked myself in the bathroom and threw up. After that, things stopped pretending to be subtle. Messages appeared on my workstation when I logged in. "That's not what happened. You agreed. Stop pretending you don't remember." I stopped sleeping. I started losing time. I would blink and find myself in a different part of the building, standing in hallways I didn't recall walking into, holding doors open with no memory of checking them. Once, I found myself sitting in the break room, coffee cold in my hands, an hour missing from the clock. One night, I caught my reflection in a dark monitor. I was smiling. I wasn't happy. I tried to quit. My resignation email was already sent. Time-stamped 3 days earlier. Perfectly written. Calm. Professional. I didn't remember writing it. I went to management in person the next morning. They told me I had already turned in my badge. They showed me the footage. It was me, handing it over, smiling. The last night happened a week later. I don't know why I went back. The building was dark when I arrived. No lights, no hum. The doors unlocked anyway. My workstation was on. The screen showed a live camera feed of me. Standing behind myself. A message appeared. "You don't need to remember everything. Just the parts we give you." I woke up in my apartment. Weeks had passed. I had lost my job. My notes were gone. But sometimes, when I write something important down, I find it crossed out later, corrected.